Hey, it's good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. It's been a really lazy day. I don't like it when the sun doesn't come out. But I hope all of you are doing okay. It has been trying, and I'm very proud of all of you for all the work that you have been doing. And again, I am happy that you're all doing your part, okay? I'm still new to this, so you've got to be patient with me. But what I'm going to talk about today is World War II and the Cold War. And I probably will cover World War II now, and then in a couple of days, I'll make a little video about World War II. I mean, about the Cold War, because the Cold War is actually in pieces. But on your next exam, we will be going from, I'm sorry, from World War II to the Cold War. And it's going to be thematic instead of chronological. So that means that we're going to begin with the Cold War when the Cold War begins in 1917, and the Cold War ends when the Berlin Wall falls down or is taken down. Okay, so we're going to cover a lot of little things here and there. Excuse me, but I'm still, believe it or not, with as much as I've been home, I'm still not sleeping as much as I want to. But anyway, let's talk about World War II. Remember, one of the things that I always like to say about World War II is that the United States does not get involved in World War II until the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. Okay, and well, of course, which is a day which will live in infamy. The United States declares war on Japan on December the 8th, and then, of course, Germany declares war on the United States. But the United States focuses on the Japanese in the Pacific. Now, we're not going to get into a lot of details, okay? Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, and then the United States Navy starts to work its way back to Japan to push the Empire of Japan back to Japan in a series of island hopping. The major victory, the turning point for that, is the Battle of Midway. And in a John Green video, he'll do more to elaborate about that. And then, of course, you have Iwo Jima and Guadalcanal and all those places that the United States wants to secure so they can bomb Japan. Eventually, the war with Japan is over with the dropping of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima and then, of course, Nagasaki. All right? Now, that's the American side. You've got a war going on in Europe, actually, and actually, there's World War II is, depending on who you ask, it's anywhere between 3 to 5 wars going on at the same time. War in the Pacific, war in Europe, war in Russia, a war in Africa, uh, and then of course the Japanese have carved up Chinese Manchuria. So the Japanese have had a war going on against the Chinese for a while. The Italians invaded Ethiopia. You've got the Spanish Civil War going on more or less at the same time. So we could spend a whole, not semester, we could spend a whole year just studying World War II. But the major thing that we have to focus on is that at some point we have to stem the tide back of the Germans. The Germans are wreaking havoc on U.S. and Allied merchant shipping with their U-boats. They have gotten to within 10 miles of Moscow twice. Uh, of course, the Russians are going to be the ones that are going to invest the most manpower here and woman power, as they did in World War One. Eventually, what the Russians will do is that they will push the Germans all the way back to Berlin. And then what the Americans and the British are going to do together is that they're going to launch an invasion of France to retake France from the Germans and then beeline it to Berlin and meet the and meet the Russians in Berlin to defeat Germany. It's pretty simple. The objective is pretty simple. The Germans start with, taking back the Sudetenland, and then, of course, they invade Poland. When they invade Poland, the English get involved, and then, of course, they sign a treaty with the Russians, but they stab Russians in the back, and they, invade Russia under Operation Barbarossa. And that was his big. That was Hitler's biggest mistake, amongst other things, right? But Napoleon did the same thing, and it didn't work out. The problem with trying to tangle with the Soviet Union or Russia is that they've just got a lot of people, and it gets really cold really fast. The window to attack Russia is very, very small. In the fall, there's a lot of rain before the winter, and then in the spring, before the summer comes in, there's a lot of rain. So in early spring, there's a lot of rain, and then of course, by, I would say, the middle of August, you're already having freezing weather. So uh, it's not a smart thing to do. Hitler was not as smart as he thought he was, and Stalin was very calculating. Aside from being a tyrant, he was a very intelligent and very calculated man. Um, I don't want to spend a lot of time on World War II battles. What I want you to focus on, there's a fly buzzing around that keeps bugging me, is I want you to pay attention to Executive Order 9066, which is the internment of Japanese Americans living in the United States. I want you all to focus on the home front. In your book, they're going to talk about, domestic production. I also want you to pay attention to the Holocaust. And unfortunately, the United States does not heed to the warnings of the Jewish community when they are told that the Germans are exterminating the Jewish population, not just Jews, but gypsies, homosexuals, intellectuals that didn't subscribe to Nazism. Anybody that wasn't a Nazi was basically uh, getting sent either to a work camp, a labor camp, or a concentration. Or they send you to a work camp, and then when you couldn't work anymore, they send you to a concentration camp, and then they just gas you. So, those are the things we need to focus on. But, I don't want to focus on the battles. I want to focus on what's going on in the home front. What's going on with people. And one of the things that is people like to say about Americans is that Americans hated the Japanese, but they did not like the Germans. The problem with Americans wasn't so much the Germans, it was the Japanese. And Americans really did not want to join the war in Europe. I mean, eventually, the war in Europe, FDR agrees because he feels that if they don't, then Russia is going to take total control of Europe when the war is over. Uh, so the deal here is also that the Russians had the man and woman power, had the people, and the United States had the industrial production. And that's what, American industrial production is what's going to help win the war. The fact that we're, building ships, tanks, jeeps, you name it, left and right. I mean, we're producing. It's kind of like right now, where a lot of these automotive companies have been told to stop producing automobiles and start producing ventilators. Well, in the war, they said, well, you're not going to make cars anymore. You can't find a 19, I think it's 43, 44, and 45 Chevys are really hard to find, or Fords, because they weren't making cars. They were making Jeeps, or they were making troop carriers. Sewing machine companies were making M1 Garands and M1 carbines. Other companies were making Colt 45s or Tommy machine, Thompson machine guns. Uh, so a lot of these companies that used to make other things were making stuff for the war effort, and we're going to come out of World War II as the most powerful country in the world. And that is going to, the Soviet Union is also going to come out incredibly powerful, and we're going to have problems with them. We're going to tangle with them, and we're going to talk. Darn fly. We're going to talk about them later. So I promised that I wouldn't have really long videos. This is a World War II video, and like I said, I hope all of you are washing your hands and making an effort to stay well. I do not agree that we're going to have as many deaths as has been told. I hope we don't. I know the economy is rough. I know that things are hard, But the only thing I need for y'all to do is to look out for your siblings, look out for yourselves, look out for your parents and grandparents, and be kind to each other, okay? And I'm probably going to film the Cold War video here in just a little bit, okay? So you all take care and be kind to each other.